Welcome back to the RSAC Conference 2025. We're still here recording live from Cyber's TV studio in beautiful Broadcast Alley at the Moscone West. I'm Doug White, and joining me for this interview is Chad Alessi. I wanted this interview because I wanted to talk to you about this, but Chad is the Managing Director of Cybersecurity for CTG, so that is really cool. Now, I'm not just doing this because, I heard you had a lot of money you were going to pay me, but
that comes later.
I think of all the people I got to talk to this week, this was one of the things I had not heard. It was something that just immediately came up to me as personal, because I do get these calls all the time, and it was about middle market cybersecurity issues. And I was talking to you earlier, I saw this presentation a few weeks ago where my client who had asked me to help them with this was listening to a pitch, and the pitch just literally started with, now first we'll want to meet with your SOC team members and we'll work with that before we begin a wider implementation. And the guy's like, I'm the SOC team, I'm legal, I'm IT support, I'm everything. And so I think all those people are out there. This is a huge part of the industry. So what do you think are the biggest threats facing all those middle market companies?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it is one that we see continually over and over again with mid-market companies, where they just have one person who's trying to do everything, right? Everything, kind of a Swiss Army knife type of person who can kind of handle everything, and by the fact that they don't have the budgets or they don't have the money to even go and hire a full team to do it, is just kind of like, well, Doug, you're it. So good luck, congratulations. Yeah, so we're trying to deal with it. But the mid-market faces a lot of the same issues that some of the bigger guys were facing a few years back, but now the attackers have moved down to the mid-markets because they're easier targets.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is still the same things that we see as high priority. So, ransomware is a big issue. That can seriously put someone out of business pretty quickly. And so we've seen things like even small veterinarian offices being hit with ransomwares. We've seen small businesses being hit with ransomware, and they're going after their backups as well. So they're trying to delete those. So they really are just disabling them altogether.
And I think that's shifting a little bit from what you were talking about. They were the second wave, but I also think because supply chain, a lot of attackers are starting to realize that, well, this is defended like crazy.
Exactly. Yeah.
But those people that put the vending machines in the lobbies of the buildings that are connected to the networks have no defenses at all.
Exactly. Yeah, you're right. And that is one that keeps a lot of the CISOs and CIOs up at night, right? Is to say third-party, attack vectors are really a big problem, and it's a risk that they're trying to deal with. So we're seeing and we're hearing from customers and clients in the mid-market that it's not necessarily the attacks are becoming more sophisticated. It's really that the attack surface has grown so quickly and so vastly that it's hard for them to keep up, right? Because they don't have the teams to be able to handle it, nor do they have the budgets to be able to go to do it.
And like I say, I get that all the time with people. I even had one that I was working for them as a contractor, and they called me and they said, we need to arrange a, say, like week where our legal and accounting teams will fly in to audit your organization. And I said, it's just me.
Yeah.
There's no legal team, there's no accounting team, there's none of that. And they're like, oh, well, what?
Yeah.
And that, I think there's a lot of companies in that position, and they're not necessarily well marketed to by a lot of the players because that's just not their price point. And they're saying we're not really interested at below 10 million or something.
Yeah, true. Yeah. And a lot of the tools and controls today, right, are minimum $200,000, $250,000 just to get them into an enterprise type of environment. And it's just beyond the budgets they can afford.
We even saw that with police. Back when we were doing early forensics training, we would see forensics companies coming in and going, so we want to meet with your lab team separately from your like line team, and
we're all the same.
Going, I'm the high-tech crimes officer. I've had no training other than they set a laptop on my desk. And it was just a little crazy.
Yeah, we see that a lot too. We've done some incident response planning right around that and trying to help with the resiliency. And we go, okay, well, we need to, get all the teams together. And they go, well, it's just one person, so we'll get that together for you. Right?
It should be quick.
It should be quick, right? So we're working with that individual to come up with a plan for them. And I think it's a matter of just setting your expectation when you go in and work with those mid-market companies to say, these guys really need help. And we need to come in from their perspective, meet them where they want to be met. And that's what we try to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, is it just money and the dollars and all that keeps like these middle market companies from being able to get into this space? And should they just be like, forget it? You know, we might as well just say we're nothing we're going to be able to do.
Yeah, no, I think budgets are a big thing, right?
Obviously.
Because you have to deal with it. You have to work through within their budgets and their means, but it's not the most important thing. And particularly for us, we try to help our clients understand it's really about visibility and prioritization, right? It's understanding what you have in your environment, what's your biggest risk you have there, really knowing what that is, and then trying to prioritize the amount of controls that you want to layer in and get the biggest bang for your buck. So looking at your security goals, matching that with your business strategy. And so what is the biggest risk if you lose a system? How can it impact the way you can actually generate revenue and make money? And then prioritizing those systems and being able to layer in those controls at the lowest cost you can to be able to be effective and do that, right? And you're really looking at, are we spending money for the sake of just this layers of defense? Are we actually prioritizing the highest risk and then mitigating that risk with some control that we can put in place, and really trying to measure that return on investment to say, okay, it makes sense for us to install a particular application because this is going to reduce the amount of risk we have today. But if it doesn't make sense and it doesn't align with your business strategy, what's the point, right? Because if it doesn't reduce a risk, then you're just adding for the sake of adding.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's the way control get applied, and I mean, I did a lot of like compliance auditing and things like that, and when we were looking, and a lot of the compliance auditing we were doing was for a large company, but it was a large company that had to bought small companies. And again, that was sort of awakening for me because I'm walking into a company where, again, we're going like, can you get your accounting team out here? I've got my accountants ready to talk to them, and they're like, oh, I'm the whole thing.
Exactly.
I'm the whole bit of it. So now, so I'll tell you what I think, and you can tell me what the answer is.
Sure.
One of the first steps I usually talk about with this is understanding your data flows. Because to me, to understand your threat surface, you have to understand what you have. And a lot of times they don't. A lot of times it's like, well, we think there's a server here, and oh yeah, we had that thing set up in 2 years ago, and it may still be there. I mean, what are your like first steps, practical steps that people need to be moving if they're in this realm? I mean, they're not just able to go, okay, we'll get a bunch more money and we'll go.
We do that same exact thing. So we try to meet them where they're at, right, to understand where their greatest risk is. So for mid-market particularly, if you go in telling them, well, we need to do a full, a formal risk assessment, their eyes will glaze over and they'll be like, yeah, that's not our process, right? So we have to go in and say, all right, well, let's start with doing a network analysis, understanding what those data flows are. Something simple. We're not going to put a scanner on your network and start scanning those things. Let's just grab some packets, do some analysis on those packets, understand what the origin and destination type of IPs are. How are these things communicating? What does your network segmentation look like? Do you have ability to actually quarantine or even triage an issue if it actually comes in? Setting them up for that resiliency discussion and handling if you do in fact have a effect, because it's not when, it's if, right? And at this
because
point,
that's what you need to do. I mean, really. I mean, because that, like, I remember going to a place, and one of the questions we would ask was, do you have a network diagram? And the person said, very smug, said, yes, I do. I said, could we see this network diagram? And he goes, yes, let me get that for you. And he goes over and he gets this paper, and puts it on the table. And I was looking at it, and I said, does that say IPX SPX right there? And he said, yes, it does. And I said, so you're running IPX SPX network? And he was like, I don't know what those letters mean. And I said, so what kind of network are you running? And he was like, just the usual kind. And so again, I immediately attached my sniffer, and I'm going, okay, let's see what's on this network. I'm like, no, this is not IPX SPX. Okay, this is TCP/IP. And he's like, oh yeah, I've heard that before. And I'm like, okay, so when was this diagram? And he flips it over and he goes, it's like 1989 or something. And I'm like, who is this guy? Bill whatever. And he goes, oh yeah, I think he retired like 12 years ago. And that was the last time this thing had been updated. So getting that, I think, and then that data flow is right on the back end of that, right?
Exactly.
And I don't care what size you are. You need to understand these things because
yeah.
you can't understand your threat surface until you understand what is being threatened.
Yeah, and that's how we find shadow IT, right? And we get these things and new applications that have been added that were, 5-10 years ago, or even when Bob or Jim were there that wrote it back in '86. Oh yeah, they added that. We're not quite sure why we added that, but it's still there. And it's still laying dormant. We haven't done an upgrade on it. We haven't done a patch on it.
Could still be IP access.
Exactly, yeah. So you don't know what you have, like you said, until you go into it. So
I saw one once where they had, we were scanning network. We saw a bunch of weird stuff. I was like, do you have any idea what this is? So we grabbed the packets, and they were unencrypted. We were just looking at them. And I'm like, I think this is EBCDIC.
Wow.
And it was literally like encapsulated EBCDIC traffic, and it was an AS400. And I said, where's the AS400? We did a full walkthrough. I didn't see any AS400. This is a bigger company, but it wasn't a huge company. And they were like, we used to have that. And I'm like, well, you apparently still do.
Still do, yeah.
Turned out it was in this person's house.
Wow.
And that person had it in their basement, had agreed to take it when they were right-sized out of a job, and said, I just love it so much, I'm going to support it. And they had all this customer data on there and just crazy stuff. It was insane. I mean, I mean, so I guess another part of this question would be, how do we get to be more proactive at this in this space? Because it's very easy to talk to a very, multi-billion-dollar company about this, but it's a lot harder when you're talking to a regional chain of car dealerships that have just as much of a threat surface as that multi-billion-dollar company.
Yeah, it's a good question, and one that we get a lot. And they're always concerned that, I need this huge enterprise budget to be able to be proactive because we just don't have the budget to do it. What we try to tell clients is you don't have to have a huge budget. You just need to have good practices in place, right, to go and do that. So it's much like us going to the doctor and getting a checkup. You have to do those checkups periodically to understand whether or not you have a 90% blockage in your heart, right? You don't know it until you get a problem or something happens, and hopefully it's not a catastrophic heart attack. You're going and getting those regular updates and checkups. So doing the simple blocking and tackling, trying to understand, do you have policies and procedures in place to handle an event if you in fact have that event? How do you actually go in and see if you do have things on your network that you didn't know you had, right? Trying to get that visibility like we talked about earlier. If you don't have visibility, you can't control or you can't protect what you don't know you don't have, right? And so understanding that, and that doesn't take a huge budget to do, right? You can do that. And then moving from that proactiveness and moving into that proactiveness, it's really going through, and the same thing that you mentioned. Look, 86 is the last time we updated our network drawing. Well, we need to do that regularly. We need to do that updating periodically. And so it's the same way as we go for a regular checkup to our doctor, we need to do that periodically on our cybersecurity controls, looking at our network, looking at the assets we have in our environment. If we've decided we're going to acquire another regional, either car wash or another car dealership, then we're adding new assets to our company. We need to go evaluate those and make sure that we're keeping that control in place.
And I have one other word to add to that, which is commitment.
Yeah, I like that.
One of the things you see, and we all know this, and you know this, is that we'll do that soon.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things I see for middle market companies is to actually commit. Yeah. Not just, Ted will get to it when he gets to it, but he also needs to go put that and then all the wiring in that other dealership we just started. You've got to find a way to put those people committed to these tasks and make them the same priority as everything else instead of letting them be this like, we'll do it someday. Yeah. And that's why the network diagram's from 86.
And that's another great one because that prioritization, right, becomes a big issue. We see that a lot too, where we go in and we start asking questions about a particular asset or something that they purchased or maybe they put in. And we go, hey, do you have this particular control around it? I mean, something as simple as like MFA or something like that they wanted to try to roll out. They go, we're going to do that. We've got that on the budget. We're going to do it in 2 years from now or 3 years from now. And so that's a risk that they're just sitting out there going, we'll do it. We're committed to do it, but it's just not as a higher priority right now for us. Right. We're going to do other things, right?
And so your big role is then providing solutions to try to help. And obviously you understand the plight of these, these companies. So, I mean, is that the main role that you guys pursue?
We do, yeah. So our goal is really not just to come in and sell you a tool or a product, right, or a control, and then try to get an implementation cost on top of that. And it's really that stacking of the rates in there, so we're making a bunch of money off of you as a company, and you don't give any value out of it.
Right.
What we try to do is come in and really build that resiliency. right, today. And so we help those clients with things like you talked about. How do you be more proactive around your cybersecurity? How do you handle the small budget that you might have and the small limited team that you might have in there to actually be able to implement these things? And then building that resiliency around it. And how do we respond to an event if it happens, right? Because it is going to happen, right? And we're going to be able to have to deal with it either way. Either we catch it early because we have a control in place that can actually do that.
Yep.
So then now we knew that we use that as some early learning opportunities for us. And then we try to build that into that resiliency, like you said, to become more proactive and make that cybersecurity proactive.
Yeah. And I would also say test it.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
I mean,
yeah.
that's another thing people neglect. And one of the things we used to do when we did DRP,
yeah.
I know it's not called that anymore, but I would walk in and I would go like, okay, your entire dev team went to lunch and they never came back. Don't worry about what happened to them, but they're not coming back. Let's just say they're not coming back. Who do you call first? You know, and you would get CIOs going, I call Steve, and you go, okay, call Steve on your phone right now. I'm like, oh, no, no, call him right now. I want you to call him.
Yeah.
And they're like, does anybody know Steve's number? Anybody?
They don't know it,
And they're like, Steve retired, and they're like, okay, who do you call now? And sometimes you get two names, and then it all peters out. So you do have to test.
Well, absolutely. And so I love that scenario because that is one of the first things we do when we grab someone's DR plan or DRP, as we, as you say. We go right to the contact list. How old is that contact list? And when you look at that contact list, and if it's old and stale and people are on there that haven't even been there in 10, 20 years, or even 5 years, you know that the DR plan is
I
not
used to
good,
ask CEOs to show me their contacts on their phone. I'm like, I want to see it. Show me the numbers, and I'm going to dial one of them. Just like, is the CISO in there? Is legal in there? And they're like, oh no, Marjorie handles all that. I'm like, hey, Marjorie didn't come back from the airport yesterday. We don't know where she is.
Right.
What do you do? And they're like, okay, I'd be helpless at that. I mean, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Chad. To find out more about CTG, please visit securityweekly.com/CTGRSAC. And thanks, Chad, for joining us today.
Appreciate
it was a pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
pleasure.
I will be back shortly with more content here, in fact, really shortly, at RSAC 2025 conference.
Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it.
You bet.